And welcome back. Air Law, the gift that keeps on giving. So, exam prep lesson 5, part 3, flight planning and preparation. We are getting to the end, I promise. But without further ado, let's crack on. Within the umbrella of flight planning and preparation, we are expected to be able to explain the requirements for obtaining and considering relevant information prior to flight under CAR 91. And that states that under the pre-flight actions, before commencing a flight, a pilot in command of an aircraft must obtain and become familiar with all information concerning that flight, including 1. Where practicable, the current meteorological information and fuel requirements, and the alternatives available if planned flight cannot be completed, and any known or likely traffic delays that have been notified by ATIS, and the status of the communication and navigation facilities intended to be used, and the current conditions at the aerodrome, runway lengths at aerodromes of intended use, any takeoff and landing distance data contained in the aircraft flight manual, and engine inoperative procedures, and finally 1 engine inoperative performance data. Now this means that before a flight you must become familiar with the met information, the fuel required, alternatives if planned flight cannot be completed, known or likely traffic delays that have been notified, the status of communications or navigation facilities intended to be used, so radio frequencies and nav aids that are available to you, the current conditions of the aerodrome and runway lengths at aerodromes for intended use, that's all in your AIPs, takeoff and landing distances data from the flight manual, so that you know the capabilities of your aircraft. And if the aircraft has 2 or more engines, you must know the engine inop procedures and 1 engine inoperative performance data. We also need to be able to describe the publications and their content that provide operational route and aerodrome information. And that is the VNC charts, the visual navigation charts that provide the topographical information for pilots to use whilst flying. The VPC charts, so the visual planning chart, and they're for use during flight planning and should not be used in flight. And the Aeronautical information publication, obviously the version 4, which you're supposed to have with you anyway. And these are used to provide pilots with general en route and aerodrome information when flying VFR. It is legal requirement to carry the AIP Volume 4 and the VNC applicable to the area of your planned flight. If on an IFR flight, AIPs 2 and 3 are required, along with the IFR charts. An AIP supplement booklet is issued every month with navigation information that is of a temporary nature. Warbirds over Wanaka, cranes, etc. Last minute changes of navigational information that is only valid for a day, e.g. grass mowing at aerodromes, and all of those are in your NOTAMs. So get familiar with those, they're quite important. But most importantly, under normal VFR flight, you are legally bound to carry your AIP Volume 4 and your VNCs. If on an IFR flight, you need AIPs 2 and 3, along with the IFR charts. You must, of course, have scanned at least the AIP supplements and the NOTAMs. Fuel requirements. We are expected to be able to state the minimum fuel reserve required for a day VFR flight under CAR 91. And that's stated in 91.305, the fuel requirements for flight under VFR conditions. And it says that a pilot in command of an aeroplane must not begin a flight under VFR unless, in the forecast weather conditions, the aeroplane has enough fuel to fly to the first point of intended landing at the planned normal cruising speed, and to fly after that point of intended landing for at least. A further 30 minutes during daylight hours, and B, a further 45 minutes at night. 3, for an aeroplane that has a special category or limited airworthiness certificate or special category exhibition airworthiness. The flying time specified for the VFR minimums fuel reserve in the operator statements required under 4755C. And that means that for a day VFR flight, you must have enough fuel to fly to the first point of intended landing, and then a further 30 minutes. And at night, it's 45 minutes worth of fuel extra to be able to complete your distance. Under 456.2, we are expected to state the requirements for the filing of a flight plan for flights under VFR Car 91. And that's covered in 91.307 VFR flight plans. And it says that A pilot in command of an aircraft must submit a VFR flight plan to an appropriate ATS before starting any flight condition under VFR if 1. The pilot in command plans to proceed more than 50 nautical miles from shore, or 2. The pilot in command requires an alerting service. B states that in addition to the requirements in paragraph A, a pilot in command of an aircraft may submit a VFR flight plan to an appropriate ATS unit for any other flight conducted under VFR. C says that a VFR flight plan referred to in paragraphs A and B must include the following information. 1. The aircraft registration and call sign. 2. The type of aircraft to be used. 3. The route, including, if practicable, for each route segment, aerodromes of departure and intended landing, estimated lapse times, and time on the ground at each intermediate aerodrome. 4. The SAR time. 5. Fuel endurance. 6. The total number of persons in the aircraft. 7. The number and the name and the telephone contact details of the PIC. 8. The name of the aircraft owner or operator. And 9. Any additional information that may assist in search and rescue operations. Meaning that you must file a VFR flight plan if you plan on flying more than 50 nautical miles from shore, or that the pilot in command requires an alerting service, flight following, etc. Excuse me. You are allowed to submit a flight plan for any other flight, but the flight plan must include aircraft's reg, call sign and type, intended route, aerodromes and ETAs, a nominated search and rescue time, your fuel endurance, total persons on board, the name and phone number and the name of the aircraft operator, and other information that is specific to finding you should your wings fall off. We also need to be able to state the requirements for notification of changes to the file flight plan in Car 91. And those are that if a VFR flight plan has been submitted to ATS unit under paragraphs A or B, the pilot in command must 1. Inform the appropriate ATS unit of any change in the details in the flight plan and of any change to the flight plan's SAR time before the expiry of the SAR time. And that means that once you've submitted a flight plan, you must inform ATS of any changes in the details. This includes diversions, this includes SAR time, but most importantly, obviously, search and rescue will affect immediately on that SAR time release. So the most important thing here is that they need to be informed the moment things change to stop an inadvertent scramble to be able to find you. Under the VFR flight plan, we need to be able to terminate the flight plan by advising the appropriate ATS unit before the flight time expires. You must terminate your flight plan before the flight plan's SAR time. As soon as the SAR time is passed, ATS will alert the RCCNZ, who will start procedures to find you, and they will assume that you have downed. We need to be able to describe the difference between ETA and SAR time under Car 91, And that description is that the estimated time of arrival is the time that you estimate that you will arrive at the aerodrome, whereas search and rescue time is the time that you want search and rescue action to start unless you call to delay or cancel. But this all has to be done before the time you initially nominated, and that's the most important part. Also, we need to be able to state the time search and rescue action would be initiated if a flight plan is not terminated before the start time. And that definition is that if your flight plan is not terminated before the start time, search and rescue action will start as soon as the start time is reached. And so that's the important component here, is that with a flight plan is one thing, but the start time completely different. Action happens immediately once that start time is reached. Okay, what do we remember? Which of the following must the pilot in command become familiar with before a flight? A. Known or likely traffic delays and the status of communications and navigation equipment. B. Conditions and runway lengths at aerodromes you intend on using. C. Fuel required and weather information. D. All of the above. Before your flight, you must become familiar with MET information, fuel required, alternatives if planned flight cannot be completed, known or likely traffic delays that have been notified, the status of communication or navigation facilities intended to be used, the current conditions of the aerodrome and runway lengths at the aerodrome of intended use, takeoff and landing distances, distance data from the flight manual, so knowing the capabilities of your aircraft. And if the aircraft has 2 or more engines, you must know engine in-op procedures and 1 engine in-op performance data. How much is the minimum fuel reserve for a night VFR flight? A. 20 minutes, B. 30 minutes, C. 45 minutes, D. 60 minutes. Yep, 45 minutes. Bearing in mind, and burn and commit this to memory because you will see exam questions around this. For a day VFR flight, you must have enough fuel to fly to the first point of the intended landing, and then a further 30 minutes during the day, and at night you must have a further 45 minutes worth of fuel. When must you terminate or extend your flight plan's start time? A. 30 minutes prior to the start time running out. B. Any time before the start time expires. C. Any time after the start time expires. Or D. The start time does not affect the flight plan ETA and does not need to be terminated or extended. Oh, I didn't highlight that one. Oops, my apologies. You must terminate your flight plan before the flight plan start time. As soon as start time is passed, ATS will alert the RCCNZ, who will start procedures to find you, as they will consider you've crashed, and they will do it immediately. So the answer is B, any time before the start time expires. Sorry I didn't highlight that. Don't know what I was thinking. Never mind. Well done. Congratulations. This is the end of the lesson 5. We're going to be kicking off lesson 6. And sorry, this keeps going, but it is a miserable exam, and you need to be prepped for it. So we'll keep going. But listen, thanks for liking, subscribing, and hitting that little alarm bell for updates. But most importantly, thanks for sharing. It's lovely to see so many people out there that are actually getting use out of this. And it makes it worth continuing. Also, we now have a Patreon site where you can grab some additional just videos and Q&A sheets for questions. So all of the Q&A sections of these, some additional exam questions, and some hard copies and PowerPoints that are available for download as well. So please enjoy that. That's under Patreon, NZ PPL Dave. Thank you all for watching, and stay and fly safe. All the best.